Hi, in this session I'm going to explain the final project overview for organizational behavior, developing healthy organizations. Everything you've been doing up to now is really about how do you develop a healthy organization. So what you're going to be doing here is creating a plan to do that. And just to explain, all of this has been building up towards that. So this project is a synthesis project. A lot of what you've been doing up to now is analysis. You'll look at one component of things, and this is trying to bring all of it together. So with that, let me jump into the actual template. So you're going to have a template here. You can either work on this in Google Docs, or you could download the template in Microsoft Word. If you want to work on it as Google Docs, you should click on Make a Copy. If you want to do it in Microsoft Word, then you can click there, and then you can have a Microsoft Word version. So the beginning talks about formatting. I would encourage you to be sure to look at our master's project grading rubric. And the first thing to explain is we have a lot of instructions in here, and there's page counts. You need to delete the instructions before you submit. And the basic idea is part one of this project is you're going to be using the competing values framework. So that's the primary book, the most important book in this course. The second part is you're going to be using all the other material. And the page count is part one is going to be by far most of your pages, 5 to 10 pages, and part 2 and 3 is going to be a lot shorter. So part one is using how you should change based on competing values framework. Part 2 is basically how you should change based on everything else in the course material. And then part 3 is really developing a plan on how you would do that. So in part 1, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look at the current culture. So you're going to take the OCAI results that you did from week 4. And if you need to, you could try to get more if you feel like you don't have enough. And you're going to interpret those, and you're going to put the pasted versions of those in the appendix. And essentially what you're going to do is summarize your current culture. So these are some questions you could consider. You might get ideas for other questions from the reading. Then step 2 is what's your desired culture. So whenever you did the OCAI process, you should have gotten data on both the current and preferred culture graphs, and you're going to look at that, and then you're going to answer what your organizational culture would be to be successful in the future. Now, remember, all of this you're not asking the question of if everything were revolving around me and my personal preferences. You're asking the question of what's going to make this organization effective comprehensively. And just as a reminder, on the desired culture, one of the things that you're considering are what are the trends that you should be aware of? How is the environment changing, and how is that going to affect you? So, and so then on the brainstorming the changes that are needed, this is going to be the most important part of this. So there's some general questions here, and then you get into very specific questions. And this is where referring to the reading this week is going to be helpful. But throughout the course, a lot of that will tie back in. So based on the competing values framework, your map that you have, how is this going to affect your strategy? I used an example in my previous presentation of how City Vision used that as a guide in our strategic plan. How should your processes change? Are there new key performance indicators, or do you have to focus more on certain key performance indicators in your organization? Are there new systems or technologies that organization is going to need to grow in? Should your organizational structure change? Do you need to think about matrix teams or other types of teams? Are there changes needed in HR or people? What type of people do you need more of, and what areas do you need more training and growth in? Are there changes needed in your hiring practices? So for City Vision, we said, we need a lot more detail-oriented people. We need training for our people more around the details. We need to grow in that and, and inform that in our hiring practices. So, so this will probably be the biggest section. And then the action plan is, what are things that you need to stop or start? Some of these relate, where should you begin? What are resources you need to get this to happen? So, steps 3 and 4 somewhat overlap, whereas this is more what needs to be done. This is going to be more action steps of what you're going to do to make it happen, if that makes sense. And then ultimately having a plan to review effectiveness. So, as I mentioned for City Vision, we put priorities on how much effort we're going to spend on the various quadrants. And we're seeing what things we achieved. And we ultimately spent a lot more of this year focused on quality. Part of that was a result of COVID. It was easier to focus on quality than some of the compete things. But just looking at, did you actually achieve a result? So all of that is in part 1. Now, part 2 is basically, it's the et cetera. So other ideas that you got throughout this course for organizational change that would improve the organizational health. And that's what this section is for, maybe some ideas from the team, healthy teams or other things that could be helpful. And then, as I mentioned before, ultimately you need a plan to include others. So if you're the executive director of an organization or the president, then that's one approach. But if you are, say, lower level management, or you don't have the ability to influence the whole organization, then the main part of your plan should be, I need to explain to the leadership about this tool, and then get them to use the tool, and then see if they want to use it. That's basically what your plan is going to consist of. And so as you go through this, one thing I didn't explain is both in step 3 and step 4, there are worksheets in the appendix. So these are just intended to give you some tools that will help inform the body. These don't count towards your page counts. And then your OCAI graphs are going to be here at the end. So if you have questions, please ask your faculty member. And we really hope that this final project is going to help you improve the overall health for your organization. Thanks.